to the July 7th Performance Committee meeting. We are calling it to order at 8:30 a.m. I would respectfully ask everyone attending this meeting to mute yourself unless you are recognized to speak. Please note that the committee meetings of the RTD Board of Directors will be held remotely via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as practicable on the board's website. Can I receive confirmation about whether we have the CART transcriptionist? I do not see one on my screen.
Yeah, they're going.
Okay, great. Thank you. During today's meeting, RTD will be providing communication access real-time translation, also known as CART. Anyone who would like to access this service should send an email to the RTD board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtddenver-denver.com, and a link will be provided. Additionally, the CART transcript can be automatically translated into Spanish for anyone who would like to access a live Spanish transcript of this meeting. A live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. I would now like to call the roll of the committee members. Director Vince Busick.
Here.
Director Lynn Geisinger.
Here.
Vice Chair Chris Guchenritter.
Here.
Director Matt Larson.
Here.
Director Chris Nicholson.
Present.
Director Peggy Catlin.
Here.
And I am Chair Michael Guzman. For the record, I also see that we have been joined by our esteemed board chair, Julian Bouquet, and Director Kathleen Chandler, as well as Treasurer Banker. Did I miss anybody? All right. Let's move on to public comment. I would like to open public comment to anyone who would like to address the committee regarding any topic listed in the published meeting agenda for the current and immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press star 9 on your phone. During this time, the committee will not offer any direct comments or responses. However, if you would like to be contacted regarding your public comment, please email the RTD Board of Directors at rtd.directors@rtd-denver.com. I don't see any hands raised. Are there any hands raised for public comment?
No, Director Guzman, there are no hands raised.
Thank you. And we had previously spoken with the office staff, and I was informed that we had not received any emails regarding this meeting. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Great. Then we will close the public comment period, and we will move on to our next item. We have one recommended action on our agenda today, and that is for the 2026 General Manager CEO short-term goals. This is for the Board of Directors to approve pursuant to the General Manager and CEO performance framework adopted in January of 2024. In alignment with the board's employment agreement with the General Manager CEO, the proposed short-term SMART goals for the performance period commencing January 1st and continuing through November 8th of 2026. Do I have a motion?
Busick, so moved.
Thank you, Director Busick. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second from Director Geisinger. Thank you. Before opening the floor to Deborah, I would simply like to remind everybody that we have a contractual agreement that requires us to work with and cooperation and collaboration, our General Manager CEO, to establish goals that serve the agency for the term of a review period, a 12-month period. Given the discussions on trying to make this process more effective and smooth, we have advanced our calendar to work on these now so that we can put this before the full board by the end of the month. The goals are meant to be written in the format of a SMART goal: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And so when we're looking at these goals, we're going to look at the preferences that have been offered by Ms. Johnson, what aligns with the Board of Directors' priorities that came out of our retreat earlier this year, and move forward. The goal is to get this passed through committee and to the board. And that way we can continue on with the work. This is one piece of the entire performance framework. There's still more work to do, but when we have this part done, then we can look at the other pieces and do a final approval with all of the framework later. In that, this is a bit of a negotiation and it is a give and take. We have certain priorities we would like to see done, and Ms. Johnson is going to bring her transit expertise and tell us where she will be most effective and what's going to make her stretch during this time. So with that, I would now invite Deborah A. Johnson, our General Manager and CEO, to share any additional information she may wish to present to the committee. The floor is yours, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Guzman. Good morning, everyone. I'm Deborah Johnson, General Manager and Chief Executive Officer. As outlined by our committee chair, these short-term goals are supposed to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Recognizing we last convened 2 weeks ago to the date, I received some very insightful feedback from a couple of members of the Board of Directors, and I've had the opportunity to meet with, I would say, the majority of individuals that provided comments. And in doing so, through the course of those discussions in which I've had with the members of the board, I was able to incorporate certain elements once we had a discussion, recognizing the intent behind some modifications to the goals. With that as a backdrop, if you look on package page 4, more specifically with short-term goal 1, that basically spans customer experience and welcoming transit environment, incorporated another facet of the goal. And there's 3 sections of said goal that would be equated to 33% of the overall goal attainment, in which I will develop and launch by June 30th of 2026, a mystery transit customer program that will enable us to do more or less pulse checks throughout the course of the time period, but more importantly, establishing a baseline. In doing this, that gives us an opportunity to have mystery customers, not just utilizing our transit services, but actually being able to lean into the customer experience in which they've garnered by engaging with frontline staff from the vantage point of getting help at the customer service center throughout the phone lines and things alike in multiple languages. And it's my intent to leverage a solicitation as we go forward. And so I appreciate the dialogue in which I was able to have with Director Larson, who put some thought into this. And as he and I discussed, this is something in which I'm very familiar with, recognizing that this agency, when I came in, wasn't doing something of this caliber due to the fact of the adverse impacts from COVID. This is a great step in the right direction, and I embrace this enthusiastically. Moving forward, as it relates to short goal 2, relative to ridership, there were some conversations that have ensued, but I believe that the critical factor here is for the board to lean into this discussion, recognizing where we are with our 5-year financial forecast and what we have on the horizon in the near term, recognizing the system boardings are at 3%. Next Tuesday, this body will have an opportunity to look at our 5-year financial forecast in the course of a discussion, because there may be some decisions that you all need to make relative to a trade-off. While I recognize the genesis of our purpose here is to deliver transit services, would not want to cut off our noses to spite our faces whereby we do that. And then in the near term have to do a reduction in force because we can't support what we have put forward, recognizing our debt capacity and other obligations in which we have. So that has remained at 3%. As relates to short-term goal 3 relative to reliability, quite naturally, for those that did partake in the training session relative to our asset management, many of you understand the criticalness of asset renewals, especially in an environment where we're delivering public services and we rely upon infrastructure to get the job done, and more importantly, people power. Recognizing that aspect, this goal has been divided into 2 sections, whereby I've incorporated in achieving system-wide service availability for all the modes that we operate, i.e. bus, light rail, commuter rail, and complementary paratransit modes of paratransit, that is. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I will yield the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Directors, you've had an opportunity to review updates to this packet. I will kindly ask you to raise your hand and I will call on you in turn if you have questions or comments. I saw Director Larson's hand shoot up first, so you are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Chair Guzman. Excuse me. I would like to mainly comment about the goals 2 and 3. I think with regard to goal number 2 and the 3% increase, I really think at this time it's difficult for the board to really know if that's the right number. Given that we will be having some upcoming discussions about the 5-year plan and some I think scenarios for how we manage the next year and what the growth opportunity in terms of ridership can be. I really think we should postpone a decision, particularly on goal 2, until we've had a chance to have those discussions with GM CEO Deborah Johnson and her staff about what really is achievable for the following year. And I think that really we should give ourselves until September to determine what the goal is and what the sort of resource allocation is to support that goal before we finalize a percentage at this point. Then on goal number 3, I appreciate that and I support what's there now so far. I do think it would be good to also have a part of that goal that identifies a target for the light rail on-time performance, where I think we've struggled lately. And I would propose probably a goal of around 95% for light rail on-time performance to be added to number 3.
Thank you, Director Larson. I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. You said 95% for light rail on time performance.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I'm certainly
I just want to make sure I have the number correct.
But yes, yeah.
Great. So I understand your objection to number 2. However, I am going to push back very hard on this and say we are doing the work that we were asked to do by the board. Early in the year, we had a conversation about whether goals should come before the processing of the budget, or if the budget should come first and inform the goals. You were a strong advocate yourself about making sure that the goals were done prior to the budgeting process. And although I understand the concern, we find ourselves at an impasse here. So I'm going to suggest we continue forward and move this as a recommended action to the full board completely and not delay. Director Catlin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to say thank you to Director Larson for proposing these changes to the goals, and I particularly like the changes to goal 1. I know that we've talked about that a little bit, and to strengthen what had been a really weak program due to COVID. I know I've talked to some of our mystery riders, and I just think that having something a little bit more established is really a welcome. With regard to short-term goal 2, I'm also a little bit concerned that we do not know, in light of the resources available, how we can increase that ridership. And I was struck by the article a couple of weeks ago that downtown Denver remains at a 35% vacancy rate. So it's pretty clear that we are not getting at least the commuter traffic that has historically supported ridership. I think we need to look at other ways that we could increase the ridership, but I just want to make sure it's an attainable goal. But again, I wanted to thank Director Larson for his suggestions. I thought they were really good. Anyway, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Catlin. Vice Chair Gutierrez, your hand was up next.
Thank you very much, Chair Guzman. Yeah, I just wanted to echo Director Catlin's comments on the first goal. Thank you to Director Larson for putting that thought in, and thank you to CEO GM Johnson for adding or amending it. Big fan of how goal 1 reads now. For goal 3, I'm comfortable with how it's written and what it is. For goal 2, I share the same sentiments around landing on a goal without knowing, what the ridership is in 2025. So I think I would be supportive in finalizing the verbiage of that goal now and having a TBD percentage. That's one approach. I mean, I think the other thing is I'd be interested in understanding more detail in the logic behind how we landed on 3%. I mean, I know you're looking at what the budget is, but I'd as much detail as you have to share on that logic, I'd be grateful in better understanding it. That's
Thank
all I
you,
have.
Vice Chair
Yep.
Gutierrez. If it's okay with you, Ms. Johnson, I'm going to keep going through collecting some director comments, and then we can circle back to goal number 2, because it sounds like that's going to be our sticking point. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. So agree on goal number 1, looks great. For goal number 3, I think my biggest thing is each of the modes that are mentioned in there, commuter rail, bus, light rail, paratransit, all face different service availability challenges. And I think that it would actually benefit us to have GMCO Johnson come to the board meeting with specific targets for each of those things that are different based on the challenges that we've had, and just break it up among those 4 modes. So rather than saying 98% across the board, I just assume our Access-a-Ride has very different on-time challenges than our light rail has very different on-time challenges than our bus, or it's not on-time, service availability. So that would be one piece there, and I'd accept whatever GMCO Johnson relative to that 98%, felt like was the sort of appropriate number for each of those. The second concern I have with that is we run a lot more buses than we do light rail trains, but the light rail trains are the ones that get in the news when they're delayed because of how many people they carry and the impact. So my concern there is that we might be underweighting the significance of service availability of dropped runs when it comes to light rail or commuter rail if we're running so many more buses. So I would just want some clarity over how we're calculating all of those together. If we're saying 98% across the board, but most of our trips are in one mode, then we're going to, by definition, underweight or ignore to some degree the other modes. So that's my concern there. For number 2, I'll just reiterate something that I think I raised earlier. There are 2 components to the ridership or boardings, really. There's the number of buses we run, number of service hours we run, and then there's how many people get on those buses each service hour that we run. We are running more service hours this year than we did last year. That's my understanding, GMCO Johnson, that we are consistently increasing service hours. The problem is this year we've seen a significant decrease in how many people are getting on the buses, to the point that, as I understand it, we're projected to drop in ridership on the order of 3 to 5% at the moment. Like, we're down from where we were. And so my concern with targeting a 3% increase is sort of my concern, like when I'm measuring my ability to lose weight. If we're going down in our performance this year, and then we have a target of a 3% increase, the odds are if we hit this goal, we will still be down from where we were in 2023. If we drop 5% this year and then go up 3% next year. So I would say, I would want to target this based on the 2023 numbers, because that was our most recent peak, and then say, hey, let's do a 0% increase over 2023 and just try to keep the number where it was, recognizing we're going down. So I would want to split this into two pieces because I think that GMCO Johnson's doing a great job bringing back service, and that's one component of boardings. And I think that the question of how many people are getting on the bus or the train is less in leadership's control, but it's something we obviously need to be worried about as well. So I would break it into those two pieces, and I would base it off of 2023 because we're unlikely to have an increase this year, it seems like. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Banker, your hand was up next.
Thank you very much. At your last committee meeting, you requested the directors to send in comments, suggestions, and whatnot. I would very much like to see what everyone sent in. I took a fair amount of time putting my thoughts together and sent them in. And I would like to have them shared with everyone on the board. And I would be very curious to see what everyone else is suggesting, because I'd be more than happy to share mine with the board. Hopefully others would feel that way too. Thank you.
Without any objection from anybody, I would hope you would let me know. I have no problem sharing that information out. It was quick turnaround time, Director Banker, and so Vice Chair Guchenritter and Deborah and I received all of the transmittals we could prior to the deadline. I did get one that was a little bit late, but we still shared that out directly amongst the three of us. So I can compile that and share it out for everybody. If somebody does not want their information shared, please let me know, but I think it's all helpful. So Director Geisinger, your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Director Larson for the work he did on this, and to Ms. Johnson for, I think, some very thoughtful changes. I think these are looking pretty good. I share the concern about I share somewhat the concern about the 3%, is that the right number? I would be okay moving forward with it. I'd also be okay if we waited to hear it, especially given Ms. Johnson's warnings that we have some big information coming up. I don't know how that affects, whether a September date is really a problem in terms of the budget. Maybe Ms. Johnson can let us know what she thinks. In terms of Director Nicholson's comments, I tend to agree, that we're going down. Almost all of that is light rail. And I know that Ms. Johnson and her team are working on that, and a lot of that, of course, came from the slowdowns, but I'm still hearing a lot of safety concerns, smoking of drugs and things like that. So I'm hopeful that we can really focus on that and start to bring our numbers back up. Thanks.
Thank you. Your hand is up again, Director Nicholson, but before I recognize you, I have other members of the body here. Chair Bouquet, Director Chandler, would either of you like to chime in at this point? Please go ahead, Chair Bouquet.
Yeah, I think one, if I'm summarizing and hearing it correctly, it seems like goal one is by far there's some common consensus, and it sounds like the changes that were made based on Director Larson suggestions are very popular, and I agree with that. I think where we're getting stuck is goal two is the biggest one that I'm hearing from. And so I think that potentially some context in regards to from staff about that 3% number would be very helpful. And I guarantee that Ms. Johnson will probably speak on this later. So I'll probably circle back after I hear from the staff.
Okay. Thank you. Director Chandler, good morning.
Morning, and thank you so much, Chair Guzman. I agree with what's been said. I think that the challenge we have right now is that all of these are being measured in the same vein, and I'm not sure that they are the same. So I agree that we should break them up based on rail, based on bus, et cetera. I also think that 3% goal may be even too high in respect to what is the trend. And I'd sent in my comments asking for not just the trend of the last 5 years, but I think I asked for the last 10 years to kind of see where that trend line is. Because I think, as Director Nicholson brought up, we could be on a downwards slope, not due to anything else, because we are increasing service times, but because of just demographics, because of the society in general, and we shouldn't put that burden necessarily on what's happening. And so I think a trend line over the past, including a longer time frame, and then also breaking them up, would help me make a better decision as well. So I hope you guys take that into consideration. Thank you.
Director Chandler, when you say breaking them up real quick, sorry, do you mean by mode?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Just wanted clarification on that.
Yeah, because I think that as Director Nicholson and others have brought up, bus is far different than rail and reliability, and also just on-time performance. It's just everything. And so I think we need to give the benefit of the doubt and expect different services are going to perform differently.
Okay, thank you. Director Nicholson, one last chance, and then I'm going to turn it over to Deborah Johnston to be able to speak to this.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to concur with Lynn and Director Guzman or Director Gutenritter and Director Larson that I think delaying the numbers for the number of service hours that we intend to run and the number of boardings per service hour is reasonable, both because we'll know more about where our ridership is and our demand per service hour is later in the year, and to everybody's point, we'll have a better thought on, okay, here's where the budget is. We will be able to accurately predict what we want the number of service hours to be better based on that budget conversation. So I would say, I think we should set an initial target now for the number of service hours that we expect to run in 2026. And I think that's something that we can do. And I think that from that, you can set a service hour, boardings per service hour goal to get to whatever it is your percentage increase that you want to be. And then say, okay, let's work on the budget around getting that number, and then have that conversation in September and say, okay, we're going to finalize that number based on where the budget ended up, how much revenue we expect to have, are we going to lose revenue? I do think it's okay to come back in a couple months and say, do we know something different now? Maybe we need to revise compared to what we thought today.
Thank you. Madam CEO, you have heard from everybody. It looks like number 2 is the hot potato question. We can talk about goal 3 maybe in a little bit, but I am also interested in hearing about a little bit more about what we know about the boardings going up to 3%. So the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Committee Chair Guzman. Just for everybody's edification, we're talking about the percentage increase in revenue service hours, not relative to boarding. That would be an output. And more specifically to Secretary Nicholson's point, when he said we should use 2023 numbers, I would like to remind everybody that in 2023, we had zero fare for better air in July and August. So it's fair to say that we can artificially do anything to increase ridership in the short term, but I think it would be in everyone's greater interest to ensure that we could sustain that going forward, because we can do those various aspects, but we're trying to create a new customer segment that would be transit not reliant, but make the choice to utilize transit going forward. So I wanted to offer that up in reference to that comment relative to 2023. More specifically, as we look at where we're going, we are in the midst of our budget development. And in doing so, the team, we start with our 5-year financial forecast because we have to ensure that we are planning accordingly and recognizing what the board heard, or I could say the Finance and Planning Committee, from our colleagues at the Leeds School of Business as it relates to sales and use tax, recognizing that 70% of our revenue does come from that source. We are being good fiduciaries in moving that forward. I do have Todd Nickel, who's on the call this morning, standing in for Kelly Mack, our CFO, and Todd serves as our Senior Manager of Budget. And Todd, if you could come off camera and just speak at a high level relative to the conversations that we have had just last week when I was posing the same question to you and the budget team relative to that 3% number. I do know we're going to have a conversation next week, the week after next, relative to finance and planning. But if you could just give a high level in relationship to where we are and why we are looking at 3%, recognizing what I said at the outset about ensuring that we're not cutting off our noses despite our faces, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Todd Nichols, Senior Manager of Budget. The issues we're facing right now in forecasting for the 5-year time period is twofold. We have funds constraints like we always do, but the new constraint that we're facing this year is we have a debt coverage ratio of 1.2 that is in our fiscal policy of 1.2, and that simply means our net revenue revenue minus operating expenses, that net revenue number must cover our debt by 1.2. And in order for it to do that, we are seeing we're seeing a need to reduce our operating expenses. That will impact our ability to do a lot of things that we would like to do, some that we probably even need to do, and increasing service could be one of those.
Thank you, Todd.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We are in the performance committee, so we'll leave the finance and planning for the finance committee. Just a friendly reminder. So let's stay focused on the task at hand, which are the goals. Director Nicholson, your hand shot up immediately. Please go ahead.
So GM CEO Johnson, 2 questions. By what is the year-over-year ridership right now? Or rather, I'll just ask the question because I was just able to pull it up. Am I correct in saying that our year-over-year ridership, according to our audited monthly financial statements, is 6.2% lower than it was in 2024? What I'm reading here is that we're down 6.2%. Is that number correct?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
For
Yes.
April, I should say.
I can't answer that off the top of my head because I don't have the documents you're looking at, so I could circle back because I would be remiss to answer that question without doing my due diligence to provide an accurate answer.
Can I follow up?
Yes.
Is it your understanding right now that ridership is down year-over-year?
So to the point that was raised, Mr. Chair, if I may, I would say that there has been a decline in reference to the boardings that we have seen if we're comparing it year-over-year. But I can't give you the specificity relative to what those numbers are, as I indicated in my previous response to you.
One more.
Last one.
Thank you. Would you say that it is accurate to believe that we will see at the same time as that an increase in service hours run this year as compared to last year? So are we on track to increase service hours this year?
Committee Chair Guzman. Thank you. Secretary Nicholson, it would be contingent upon the board, but staff's recommendation would B, increase service hours relative to our August service change. And then going forward in January, as you heard Mr. Nichols say, we're looking at 3% increase relative to operating. So if it's the board's will, then I would say yes. But if you guys decide to do something differently, then no.
That's it. I got to move on. Director Larson.
Yes, I was wondering, I mean, looking into next year where I guess we have concerns about our ability to increase service hours next year or possibly have to decrease them. And thinking about goal 2, if we were looking at both service hours and boardings per hour, would it be possible to have a proposal that would, within a given amount of service hours that's budgeted for next year, include a proposed configurations of our service that would allow us to concentrate service on the lines where we think that the boardings per hour, we know that the boardings per hour are highest, and thereby within a certain amount, with a certain amount of service hours, be able to increase ridership, even if that meant that we might have to decrease service hours on some of our less efficient lines. I was wondering if we would be able to see kind of a scenario or projection over the course of the coming weeks or months that would allow us to possibly have an option, I guess, to say, well, we want to do this with this goal. Is that something that we would be able to get?
Madam CEO.
Yes, thank you very much, Committee Chair Guzman. Thank you, Director Larson. Just for everyone's edification, at the Operations Safety and Security Committee meeting that's taking place on July 16th, we will be putting forward our service performance and monitoring standards, a revision of, or I should say a review of what was done previously. Quite naturally, one would use a COA to ensure that we can leverage that going forward. But simply put, that would be up to the board to discern if you wanted to do a trade-off relative to looking at the efficiency of a bus route and a rail line. And if in fact there's a threshold relative to a certain boarding per hour, this body could decide if in fact they would like to alleviate, or I could say eliminate, the non-performing bus routes and or rail lines going forward relative to the monies that are being put into those. So that would basically be a policy decision. Thank you.
Director Larson, did you have any more?
No, I guess I do, in the sense that is there a way for us to kind of see a projection of what we think would change given a policy decision like that? Because I mean, really, that's what I would like to kind of get to is seeing, is there a way within the budget constraints that we're going to have for next year to get to or at least expect to get to a higher ridership even within those constraints by making some of these trade-off decisions. And I would, what I'm really looking for is kind of a way to see a projection, so that if we're doing that, we kind of have some expectations around it, and that we can update the performance goal 2 to reflect those changes.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
Director Larson, can you be more specific? I'm not certain that I'm following you relative to what you're saying.
I guess, I mean, I think for the OSS meeting, if we wanted to change the thresholds for keeping lines and things like that, in order to make that decision, I would like to understand, well, if we do that, would that allow us to put more service in places where we do have the most efficiency, and would that allow us to increase the number of boardings per hour on those lines, so that we could make that decision with some expectation of increasing ridership, if that makes sense.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. So I know you're using the term lines, but you mean bus routes as well as rail lines, because we wouldn't just be
Yeah.
tearing out rail
Yeah.
lines. Okay, so with that as the backdrop, there are some factors that we have to take into consideration. We have to look at land use. We have to look at various demographics in reference to what we see the population growth. We will be working with Dr. Cog to, get those numbers as we move forward. And that's part of the COA. That's why we call it the comprehensive operations analysis. And so if in fact there was going to be a short-term iteration of that, I would really implore everyone to recognize that that would be short-term, because we have to do our due diligence, recognizing that there's been a lot of different changes that have come full circle since this agency last undertook a variation of the COA, considering that it commenced prior to COVID. And so as we move forward, yes, there could be something of that sort if you wanted to hone in and look at the efficiencies relative to boardings per hour and trying to ascertain where we're getting the biggest bang for the buck. I'll use the same example once again. If you have bus route AA versus bus route ZZ, and you only have 2 boardings per hour on one, and the cost per revenue service hour is $100. And that means that each boarding is costing you 50, but on the flip side, Route ZZ has 100 boardings per hour. It's only $1. So that would be for this board to deduce what would be most prudent as we move forward. And staff could put forward those scenarios. I have looked at numbers, and it's really interesting because oftentimes, just by virtue of the sub-districts that the Regional Transportation District has, that there's often, concerns raised by members of this body that say they don't have service in their district. So I really believe that's a conversation that needs to ensue amongst the board members. And relative to staff, we're more than happy to put that forward, but that'll be up to this body to deduce what might be most beneficial as it relates to service delivery. So simply put, yes, we could provide that information because I've seen it. And so that'll be a discussion. It could be difficult, but I think you don't have to be disagreeable when you disagree, but it's discerning what might be optimal relative to this body providing, I say, direction to staff moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Geisinger, your hand was up next.
Thanks. I agree. It would be really nice to see by line and by bus route and all of that. It gets back to the old family of services chart that we used to get, but to see what the boardings are, and I think that one also showed the subsidy. I think that would be very helpful. I mean, I think that in terms of making the big decisions that Director Larson is raising, that probably is best done as part of the COA process, because all of that is going to raise a lot of concern and interest, I think, among the public, and we would want to go through doing it that way. Getting back to just the short-term goals, as I think about it, I think there are questions around the finances and all, but if Ms. Johnson is comfortable going forward with 3% today, I'm fine with that as well. I suppose we could talk about whether we change that in the future, but I'm comfortable moving forward on that.
Thank you. Director Catlin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Director Geisinger and also with GM CEO Johnson that the appropriate place to look at that trade-off analysis is within the comprehensive operation analysis. And we started on that, I think it was called Reimagine RTD, and I was part of that subcommittee. And there was a big discussion about, coverage versus the ridership. And as you pointed out, in certain sub-districts, in other words, mine, when you have three boardings or 3 trips per peak hour in the morning and afternoon that one region, that there's a minimum amount of coverage that the taxpayers are asking for. And I think in a trade-off analysis, if you look at the pure cost benefit, you're going to find that that you're not going to have a minimum amount of service in some areas. So I guess we have to be cautious about it. And sorry to go on, but I do think that the appropriate vehicle for analyzing that would be in the next iteration of the COA. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Catlin. Actually, I came up through Conifer on my way back from New Mexico during this week, and I counted the number of commuter rail or commuter bus stops from the moment I hit the county line till we got to Denver. And I think it's the CV that was running on the stretch that I was driving with my friend, and saw firsthand how large of an area that we are providing some minimal amount of service to, and how desperately important that could be for somebody who doesn't have a car or is unable to drive themselves from those further back parts into Denver. So I have a great appreciation for that. Thank you for your keen observation there. Director Bouquet, sorry, Chair Bouquet, you had your hand up and then it went down.
I'm going to come back if that's okay.
That's fine. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. So I have one quick point to make, and then I have a question for GMCO Johnson. And the point would be that service from Conifer or Ken Carroll that comes into Denver is service to my district. It's service to downtown. And so I think we do want to have we do want to address the idea of the importance of increasing service hours to play in those sorts of places, even if we're not getting an increase in, boardings per service hour. And so I do think that, when we talk about separating service hours and the question of increasing service versus the question of how many people are getting on those buses and trains, we should be thinking about them differently, because Peggy's district does need more service, just straight out, whether or not it gets more boardings per service hour. So I would really encourage us to split that 3% up as a sort of math problem into those two components. But the question I have for GMCO Johnson is, can you talk a little bit about the different types of control that you have as GMCO over those two components? Because I assume you have very different levers to pull to increase service hours than you do to increase the number of people boarding for each service hour that we run. And I just would love to hear you speak about what you can do to increase each of those differently.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. So if I heard you correctly, you're talking about increase in revenue service hours versus transit utilization. Am I correct? All right. So basically, when we look at revenue service hours, that's something that we're going to do with intention and purpose as we look at where we are holistically with our budget, quite naturally, because this agency is labor intensive and we need people power to do that going forward. So if anything, when you set a schedule, you're going to start with a primary aspect of developing said schedule. From that, you're going to discern how many vehicles you have. From the vehicles, then you discern how many people you have. And then you look at the supervision and the congestion relative to the actual service delivery in and of itself. So when we think about that holistically, we want to ensure that we are being good fiduciaries and that as we deliver service, we're being most efficient with said service delivery. So on the flip side of it, we want to ensure that we are not putting forth service whereby we're not getting a return on investment, but also factoring in the service equity piece in and of itself as we move forward. Recognizing the connectivity, because we operate a transit network, we have to think about the transferability as we move forward. Where are the primary employment sites or activity centers in which people are going to? So it's more or less like a configuration of a puzzle as we move forward, discerning what might be optimal relative to what we foresee in reference to the potential of transit utilization, with somebody perhaps going to a higher institution of learning versus medical appointments and things alike. You could have greater throughput as you look at the customer segmentation relative to somebody using mobility devices. When you do a schedule, perhaps you need more running time in reference to those people being able to board, because you won't have a vehicle berth at a station or a platform as long. So those are the different elements that we take into consideration moving forward. And then the transit utilization piece around that, utilizing the examples that I had, is engaging with those different activity centers per se, especially if we're looking at the customer segmentation, what might the purpose of the usage be about, and do some promotive type activities around that. Is that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Busick, your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks. I think I'm the only one that hasn't said anything yet, but I thought that by making the motion, I made myself perfectly clear. I support these goals as drafted and as amended by our GMC, after input from directors. 2020, when we set the 2025 goals, we had these wild, where'd these numbers come from? I don't know, but now we've got some numbers that make some sense, and directors have worked with our GM CEO, and we've tweaked some of this stuff. Like I said before, ridership is a very difficult animal to improve or increase merely because we don't own a lot of the factors that go into that. We can only do what we can do, and as I said, I think at our last meeting, our GM CEO, put safety first over knowing that there'd be a tremendous impact on ridership. And that was part of her short-term goal for 2025. So I really don't believe that Ms. Johnson is doing anything nefarious to make sure she passes her goals. But I think that we rely on her as a consummate professional to help us and guide us in this regard, and not just lead us by the nose and say, here, just do this. So I'm a big fan of getting this done, getting this passed today, bring it forward to the board. We need to move forward on this, and so Ms. Johnson can today start, creating the strategies to make all this happen. Thanks.
Right. Director Larson.
Yeah, I guess for me, I don't think Ms. Johnson has any nefarious motivations here, but I do think ridership growth is, it's certainly been defined by the legislature as one of the chief things that we as a board and an agency need to accomplish. And I think that we really need to do our utmost to understand what the trade-offs are and the choices are for this coming year to increase ridership growth, and with understanding the budget that we're constrained by. So I would motion to postpone a decision on goal number 2 in particular, but the performance goals in general, until we have an opportunity to understand some of the issues that are coming up in our upcoming committee meetings, and to really get some more back and forth and deeper understanding of what choices could be made for next year within the current COA to increase ridership. So I'd motion we postpone a decision on this for July, and instead plan on it for September.
A proper motion has been made. I see no second. That fails. Director Nicholson, your hand is raised.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to amend the short-term goals to read for short-term goal number 2.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Before you make a motion, maybe offer your suggestion to find out if it is something that can be agreed to with the general manager CEO. This is not a one-way conversation. This is a two-way conversation. So that's why we're here. Let's have the conversation first. And then if it's agreeable, we may not even need to make a motion. It may just be agreed to. I don't know. But go ahead and say what you were going to say.
Yes. So my suggestion would be that we amend the short-term goal number 2 to increase system-wide boardings by a number to be proposed by the GM CEO no later than September 30th of 2026 and approved by the board no later than September 30th, 2026 for the period commencing October 1st, 2025 and continuing through September 30th, 2026. So that would give the GM CEO the opportunity to, let me actually restate the motion. My apologies. Let me restate the motion. To increase system-wide boardings by 3% or a number proposed by the GM CEO by September 30th, 2025, and approved by the board by September 30th, 2025, from the period commencing October 1st, 2025 and continuing through. So what that would do is it would leave the number the way it is, but give us the option, give the GM CEO the ability to propose an alternative number at no later than the end of September, as long as we approve it by the end of September.
Director Busick.
Just a restatement of Director Larson's motion.
Yeah. Okay, I am going to call upon our chair real quick. Please opine here, because you requested this committee do its work and hand over to the board a recommended action from this meeting for the end of the month. The collection of director feedback was received. The goals were adjusted, keeping them within the SMART framework. And I would remind everybody, this is a first piece of a larger framework that we have to figure out. A mistake that was made last year was that we were not able to complete the entire framework. We got caught fighting over goals, and that cannot happen again. So we're trying to break this down into manageable pieces as we go forward. Mind you, we're still responsible for working on the framework we're currently in for this review period as well. So this is a simultaneous thing going on. I am at a pinch point, right? So we need to make a decision here. If we're going to delay this at this point, my suggestion would be then we revert back to the contractual language. We don't discuss the matter again until the end of the year. I don't think anybody wants that. There's been plenty of work put into this quickly. So, Mr. Chair?
Well, first off, before I go forward with my statement, was that a motion prior from Director Nicholson?
It was a
Yeah.
suggestion, not made as a
suggestion.
motion.
Okay. If it was a suggestion, then it's different. If it was a motion, then it would have failed due to a lack of a second. Okay. So if I were to give my recommendation, I believe that one, GM CEO Johnson has been more than flexible in regards to listening what were the priorities of this board. Again, what we're hearing from the state is very reflective of what I believe we identified as our priorities and what the GM CEO has turned into our SMART goals. My recommendation for this committee is I would pass this through committee. And again, it seems like the holdup is when it comes to the second goal. And we're getting to a whole nother area where, which I appreciate the conversation, but it's like I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse with this idea of like we haven't even seen an updated COA. We haven't even seen, what are going to be potential, ridership ideas. And then this idea of, hey, give us multiple, scenarios and see which routes aren't performing. I'd be very cautious with that as well for this board, especially because this board is currently geographically elected, just to be cautious with that going forward. So my recommendation is land the plane. I would bring this forward to the full board. I think that the suggestions that were made, and again, the feedback that was given, specifically Director Larson's feedbacks for the first goal, is shown and has been updated here, and I think it is an improvement. Where I'd be cautious between now and the 28th, because this is what we kind of are trying to avoid, as Committee Chair Guzman said, is we don't want to get into a conversation between now and the 28th of, I'm not happy with the 3%. Here's a number I want to propose. I think this is more than reasonable, that has been presented to us. If there's anything that you truly believe would be reflective of what you're hearing from your constituents, in which, they are not happy with that goal too. I mean, that is one thing, but I just would be cautious with us going back to where we were in January and just throwing out numbers there. So my recommendation, land the plane. I mean, again, ultimately it's up to what this committee is. I also want to respect the rest of your guys' decision. And we don't want it where the board is coming in and saying, hey, we're making all these major changes. So, I mean, I'm happy where it is and I'll respect where the committee is at. So,
Director Nicholson.
I don't believe I got the chance to receive any feedback about my suggestion from GMCEO Johnson of just splitting that goal into, to be clear, the two metrics that were provided, or rather sort of, in the previous year's goals. In our current goal, we list the number of service hours is the way that GMCEO Johnson wrote it. This many service hours, this many boardings. All I'm asking for is this many service hours and this many boardings per hour, which multiply together to be this many boardings. And I'm wondering if GMCEO Johnson would be amenable to describing the goal in those terms for this year.
If I may,
Please.
Mr. Chair, so you said for this year, sir, I'm confused because we're currently in 2025 and that's already been outlined for 2025. Are you talking about 2026?
Yes.
Okay. And so recognizing where we stand currently, hence with the movement of this goal development process to be July, hence I have 3%. We can go back and modify that once we've adopted the budget to be more specific relative to what that 3% would equate to. As I indicated at the outset of this meeting, we're in the process of doing our budget development relative to what that may be. And you heard from Mr. Nichols, Senior Manager of Budget, as relates to that. So I can't give that to you as I sit here right now, as we're doing trade-offs. And then further to the point that you raised about your amendment, keeping in mind that pursuant to statute, we have to have the budget available for public inspection by October 15th. If we were to garner feedback, I don't think September 30th is feasible. So I would ask this body once again to decide collectively what it is we're doing, because I'd be remiss to say that I'm slightly frustrated because each and every year, this is the 5th year now, we're really moving into the 6th year in which each time the goalposts are moved relative to having this conversation, even after this body has adopted a framework relative to the actions taken in January 2024. So please excuse my tone, but it's like it's Groundhog Day over and over again. Thank you.
Director Catlin.
To Ms. Johnson's point, I would suggest that we vote on the original motion.
I am just writing out the list of names to make sure that I have an accurate roll. I'm going to do a roll call vote because we do have disagreement. I don't know how people are going to vote on this. So we'll go by name. Director Busick.
Yes.
Director Geisinger.
Yes.
Director Guchenritter.
Yes.
Director Larson.
No.
Director Nicholson.
Yes, for today.
Director Catlin.
Yes.
I'm Committee Chair Guzman. I am also a yes. The motion passes 6-1, the no being Director Larson. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's input on this. I did not say it at the beginning. Director Larson did provide very thoughtful feedback, and I do appreciate the work that you put into that and your ability to follow up and answer further questions for the General Manager CEO. As requested, I will compile the emails that were sent in by all directors that I received them from, and that will be distributed by the board office to all directors of the board. Thank you for the hard work. We send the recommendation to the full board. Chair Bouquet, I am passing this off to you, sir, and we will continue the work. Ms. Johnson, to you. I know this was a quick turnaround. I know this is frustrating from the end of having to change calendars every year and do this work, but I really do appreciate the effort and the ability to lean in and work through the director comments one by one. We spent an hour of time going over what we thought were the most relevant to the goals that were presented and discussing the others that were given to us. Vice Chair Gutschenritter received the information. Unfortunately, because of complications with schedules, that meeting had to be moved and then canceled and then moved again. And so we were not, all three of us, able to get there, but we were all three aware of what was being discussed, and saw the immediate proposals coming back. To that end, chairing committees is difficult, and I thank you for your patience with me as I learned to do this, and I think we have worked well together this year. So to all of you for your effort and hard work put in, I want to thank you. This is probably one of the most difficult conversations this committee recommends to the board, and it is where we need to lean in and butt heads a little bit, and that's fine. It's also where we need to find sort of reconciliation with one another and agree where we can. Even if we disagree on other things, we don't need to be disagreeable. So I just thank you for your professionalism and for your decorum during our meetings. I think that's really important to tell all of you. That said, if there are no other matters before us, I can certainly call for a motion to conclude. Director Gutschenritter.
Thank you, Chair Guzman. Yeah, real quick, I just right back at you. Thank you for chairing this committee and for your leadership and getting us navigating this group through the difficult conversations. And so thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. As a reminder, the board does not hold any meetings during the month of August. So the next Performance Committee meeting will be scheduled for Monday, September 8th. For that meeting, the Performance Committee work plan includes items regarding the General Manager CEO performance of the 2025 appraisal, the 2026 goal setting timeline, which we're currently working through right now, and the strategic initiatives for the 2025-26 performance year. The quarterly performance discussion with the General Manager CEO will be held in executive session. However, please keep in mind that plans are subject to change, so September's agenda may be slightly different from what I have outlined today. Part of that is we were going to discuss the creation of the goals to get them ready. We're already doing that. It was on the work plan, so when this was planned, that's part of the conversation. Maybe what we will need to do is look at the framework for the current year. I would suggest, if you don't know what that framework looks like, refer back to previous emails for this committee. The information was sent out with the RKL reports that we received and how we set up the framework last year. And I thank you for your time. If there is no objection, I would like to call this meeting adjourned at 9:37 a.m.